Okay, let's get started, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's Royal Economic Society European Job Market webinar. It's fantastic to see so many people here. My name's Professor Caroline Elliott. I'm in the economics department at the University of Warwick, and I'm delighted to be joining you from a very sunny Warwick University campus this afternoon. So, in my role at the University of Warwick, I am Deputy Chair of the Social Sciences Faculty with responsibility for education, and I'm also Deputy Director of the Economics Network. So given that we've got so many participants this afternoon who are thinking about applying to the European job market, I will just give you one plug and say that if you haven't started lecturing already, or you haven't got much lecturing experience, when you're successful in the job market, then look out for notifications from the Economics Network about the training for early career lecturers that we offer. So thank you all for coming this afternoon. Thank you to the Royal Economic Society for hosting this afternoon. Thank you to our four speakers. You're going to hear from two people who are hirers on the European job market, and you're going to hear from two people who have recently been successful on the European job market. It would be fantastic if at least some of you could keep your cameras on. It just makes it helpful for our speakers when they've got friendly faces that they can see when they're presenting. So if you're brave enough to keep on your camera, that would be fabulous. But if you could stay muted unless you ask a question, that would be appreciated. We will keep an eye on the chat throughout the presentations this afternoon. So if you have any immediate questions, then please put them in the chat. But I promise that I've already told our speakers I will keep them to time this afternoon so that we have lots of time for your questions at the end of the session, and they'll have time to respond. The event is being recorded, and the recording will be added to the Royal Economic Society website, hopefully later this week. Can I just remind you that the Royal Economic Society has a code of conduct, so we would ask everyone to be respectful today. I'm sure you will be. And at the end of this afternoon session, which is going to be an hour long, there will be a poll, so we would invite all of you to provide your feedback. So I think that's all from me. So it gives me great pleasure to pass now to our first speaker this afternoon, who is Ram, who was successful on the job market a few years ago now, and now is one of those people recruiting on the job market. So Ram, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Let me start sharing the slide. So welcome all, exciting times. So I'm going to start working the Zoom. Let's see. Okay, so welcome all. So I'm going to straight talk about, since Caroline said that she's going to keep to the time, so I'm going to jump straight into it. So what are employers looking for? So first is research. I don't have to really convince you on that. Okay, more than that, it is where your research sits and how you see yourself being successful in the research world. So you have to really convince the employers about that at the outset. Then, it's teaching. You really have to be convincing on the teaching side as well. As you can see, especially in the UK, recently there is a lot of pressure from the point of view of teaching. So even if you go to the most research intensive institutions, you can still be asked to do a lot of teaching, and teaching means you have to really deliver at the highest level. So you have to be very convincing. Okay, so in terms of interviews, we are looking for your familiarity with Bloom's taxonomy, Kolb's cycle, types of assessments you are going to design. If you haven't already lectured or being a teaching fellow, then if you have done something like an associate fellow of the HEA, then that should really help you prepare. But these are some things, some words at least people are looking for, especially from the HR side. Okay. One of the recent things that has taken over, teaching in economics is the recent use of artificial intelligence on assessments. I find Asimoglu's letters to the RES newsletter especially very enlightening. I would recommend you read some of those letters, and they may help you in convincing people that you can take the challenge of AI on assessments. Some of the universities are interested in how you're going to secure external funding. If you don't have any experience, don't worry about it. If you have some experience, that's a definite plus. Some universities, not all, especially the post-92 universities, which I'll talk about in a minute, they will be asking you to do some admin in terms of pastoral care, like personal tutor, things like that. And these are, if they ask you questions about these, then, any familiarity that you can gain about these sort of roles is a plus. People are expecting that you will contribute to the department life in some manner. Some universities, they look for global partnerships involvement. That means, so we have transnational partners where you'll be asked to run a program, or we'll be looking forward for you to contributing to our global partnerships efforts. Okay, I'm not saying that this is it's something some universities are really good at, and some universities don't do this. So, it depends on where you are. One of the things that we try to ascertain during your first interview stage is the compatibility to the department, which means that where you will situate yourself and how you will situate yourself in the department. So collaborating with someone in terms of research or complementing the teaching are the two ways to convince the interview panel about how to be compatible to the department. Sustainability is a major issue. People will be asking you questions about sustainability and how your research, you becoming an academic is going to be a plus to the society and sustainability. I very well know that in my university, we do ask about this. Okay, next. So in the UK, I'm going to float it just in the UK, as I'm from a UK university. There is a distinction between pre-92 and post-92 institutions. Post-92 institutions are supposed to be more research intensive, but whatever it is, you will be having teaching expectations, and make no mistake, people will be asking you questions about this, and you get ready about that. Then there is a difference between economics department and business school. Again, the practice is different in economics departments, because all of them do economics in the economics department. So, you can convince about your research better to a bunch of economists than somebody from the business school, where the composition of the interview panel may be people who are not even related to economics. So when you are when you are applying for a business school, then you have to make sure that you say you talk about your research as plainly as you can to a layman. Funding model, different universities have different type of funding model to fund their new academics. So I shouldn't say too much about this, but sometimes you may, so some funds are allocated for some lectureship hiring. So you have to situate yourself in that particular funding. So pay attention to the application, what a particular application is looking for, who you are. And this takes me back to Eric Maskin's comment. If you can convince yourself that you like something, then you have the ability to convince others that they should like your work. So, so please be excited about your work. I'm sure you are. And then present yourself accordingly. Okay, you don't have to really blend into all the time. Okay, salary versus location is a consideration. Some of you maybe fresh out of the mint. Some of you, they may be having family and things like that. So that is one of the considerations that you may look for. So sometimes you may want to do research about the location that you are applying for and the salary that particular institution offers. Okay, just a comment. Now, most of okay. So virtual element in practice just went by. Okay, so virtual element. Some of the institutions may ask for pre-recorded job market presentations. Some people may ask for Zoom, Teams, Skype phone interviews. I would like you to prepare 2 spiels. Introduce yourself about your job market paper. Clarity takes priority over complexity. Bad internet connections count against you. Okay, so pre-recorded presentation must be done very well. Okay, and then I'll just go to the last one. Okay, what you want to ask during negotiation stage is the teaching load, work allocation models, and how many research hours you'll get. That's a must. Okay, and kind of research expectations you'll get from the point of view of the REF. Some institutions may ask you to do any number of publications. Some institutions may ask you to do good publications as opposed to number of publications. So you must be clear about that. It's a good idea to ask for what kind of research support and early career support that will be provided to you, straight from the dean or someone who is in the position of offering with that advice. Again, I just thought of putting pension contribution, for some people who are not fresh out of the mint to be vigilant about the pension contribution that different institutions make. So hopefully that's useful. I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you, Ram. So our next speaker is Margaret, who was successful a couple of years ago on the job market. If anyone's got any questions on Ram's presentation that they want to ask before the Q&A at the end, then you can put those on the chat. But Margaret, over to you. Thank you.
Many thanks. Welcome, everyone. My name is Margaret Davenport. I'm a lecturer in the economics department at King's College London, which is inside of the business school. I joined last autumn. I went on the market, therefore, 2 years ago for an entirely virtual market. But right after I was brought in, I was on the junior hiring committee as well. So when I sat down to put these notes together for you, I kind of took both sides of it. So I just have, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to prepare for the interviews. I'm going to highlight kind of what I viewed as the typical kind of setup for the interview, and then I'm going to just emphasize some of the things that are specific to a virtual context. So your CV and your job market paper and the reference letters have made employers interested at the point where you're being invited for your interviews. And the interview is really a 30-minute and sometimes even less opportunity for you to completely convince them that they should be inviting you for the flyout. Now, the interview in a virtual context is going to be relatively low cost. Okay, so institutions are going to be inviting a lot of candidates for interviews. They can pack more interviews in because there aren't moving costs. And so on the other hand, the flyout is quite costly. So it's very important that you're completely convincing them of your caliber at the end of this interview. Now, what takes center stage is really the job market paper. I'm basing this on all of my interviews, more or less had this kind of setup. The focus is on the job market. You'll usually be asked to kind of introduce yourself and then go right into kind of giving a spiel on your job market paper. And the length of the spiel will vary by interviews. So my recommendation, I wrote down a 1-minute pitch, a 5-minute pitch, and 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be these exact number of minutes, but the idea is to have a nested presentation so that if you're interrupted along the way, after a first minute of speaking, everyone's aware of what you're working on, the main research question, the type of methodology that you're using, and the importance of the research. The 5 minutes, then you just get kind of more specific as you move down. And the second thing that you're going to be asked about is your project pipeline. I would recommend having at least 2 other projects that you're working on, that you're going to be continuing to work on, basically over the tenure period or the tenure track period, because you want to convince them that you're going to be able to continue publishing not only your job market paper because of the great amount of promise that it has, but that you're also able to produce other projects and particularly have your own independent research agenda. You will be asked about your teaching experience and your preferences. In my experience, when I was interviewing across Europe and even in the UK, it was somewhat less important for research positions. But nevertheless, you don't want to say, I'll teach anything you need me to teach. You need to have some sort of idea of what you want to teach, what you're good at teaching, and also about your pedagogical kind of view, and have something to say about that. And then finally, or the last two points will be the institution-specific questions. So particularly if you're not applying for a job in London or Paris or Frankfurt, you're going to want to be able to convey an idea of why you would want to come to that particular institution, particularly if it's in a smaller area. If you don't have experience working in that country or speak the local language, for example, that's going to be really important for you to get that across. And also who you want to work with in the department. Always take a look at the people you're interviewing with, but also the broader department, and have an idea of how you fit in there and why you think you would be a good addition to the department. And then finally, they'll ask you how your market's going, and that's also a way to gauge kind of how popular you are as a candidate, but also, how likely you are to come for a flyout and how interested you are for the position. So just make sure if they're asking you about other interviews that you have, that you're using kind of like universities as a comparison, because all of these questions will be important in deciding whether or not you're invited for the flyout. And then finally, before I move on to the last two slides I have on the virtual context, have fun with the interview, and don't forget that employers are really looking for a future colleague. So you be professional, but try to relax a bit, have fun with the process, and show a little bit of your personality and be yourself, because that is really fundamentally important, I think, across the board for departments, in addition to your research and all the things that I mentioned. And it's a tall order. So next, just in terms of virtual interviews, don't underestimate the important differences with being online, particularly with regard to setup and scheduling. So this first slide, I'll talk about the setup. So when you do your mock interviews, and I do recommend doing mock interviews, do them online also. Check your headset, wear a headset to reduce feedback. Position, the angle, the quality of the camera that you're using, the background, your attire, make sure that all of that's presented in the best possible way. In my personal experience, this was important. I had in-person mock interviews, and then with one of my letter writers, I sat down and had another online mock interview. And the position of my camera, he said, well, you look very small. And he said it gave kind of the impression that I was kind of coming from it made me seem a little bit more insecure when I was interviewing. So that was kind of a change that came out of just checking everything when in an online context. Also practice how you're going to be taking notes and how you're going to be referencing your materials. So it's pretty obvious when someone has a second screen and they're reading things off of a screen when the camera's in front of them. You don't want to be looking down while you're presenting. So these are the kind of things that you need to think about when you're in the interview, and in case you have any online flyouts. I'm not sure what most or what, if people are still doing that this year. And then be prepared for the different programs. So again, in my experience, I had all of my interviews on Zoom, and then the first Teams one that I had, I didn't have a plugin that I needed for my video, and then I ended up having to reschedule the interview, and luckily it wasn't kind of the most important interview that I had, but it was very nerve-wracking, and it wasn't a professional impression that was made. So make sure you're just double checking everything on that front. Finally, you give yourself the best chance for success. In terms of scheduling the virtual interviews, you want to make sure you leave yourself time in between to take steps outside. That's a really fundamental difference between being in person and being online. Is, normally and more so for flyouts, but maybe you'd have a coffee, or you'd have a chance to kind of walk physical distances to use the restroom and things like that. So you're going to be sitting for extended periods of time. So just make sure you're taking breaks. And then don't schedule your most important interviews too early or too late in the day. Not too many interviews in any single day. And in my experience, if you are overscheduled on a particular day or on a particular afternoon, I think it is okay to go back and just ask very politely if there are some alternative slots that can be opened, just so you're not forcing or kind of putting yourself at a disadvantage from the get-go. So that's my time's almost up. I'm gonna go ahead and stop there, and I'm happy to answer any further questions, and just best of luck to everyone, and yeah, all the best.
Margaret, thank you. We have got a question in the chat, and it relates directly to something that you said. So it was put in the direct chat just to me. So I'll ask you this question straight away. So
Sure.
Sarah has asked, would it be possible to tell us a little bit more about how to answer the question, how is the job market going?
Yeah, so I found it tricky, and it caught me off guard the first couple times I had it. I kind of said, so when I wasn't asked a very specific question about what institutions, I said, I'm really enjoying the job market and I'm happy with the outcome so far, and then put it kind of back on them, and didn't give too much information. So if it's a specific question about, how many interviews do you have, that's more of a difficult situation to kind of, I think, be honest. You be honest. But in terms of naming institutions, I would probably recommend not revealing that information at an interview stage, particularly. If
That's
that
fine.
answers the question.
That does. Thank you very much. So we've heard from one recruiter, and we've heard from one person who has recently been successful on the European job market. And we'll follow that structure for our remaining two speakers. So next, I'd like to introduce Alessio, who's from the University of Surrey, who wasn't on the job market that many years ago, but now is a recruiter. So Alessio, over to you.
All right, so let me share my slides. So hope you can see the slides.
Thank you.
All right, so yes, I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Surrey. I've recently chaired the junior hiring campaign for the department, and I mean, 3 years ago I was actually in your shoes, so I was on the other side of the market. So basically, so I think Margaret basically covered most of the virtual elements of the market for economists. So I'm gonna spend some more minutes about I will say the application package we expect you to have, and some more words about the job market presentation. So it's as some of you may know, is a very centralized system, online centralized system. There are, exactly to match demand and supply, was Ram was saying. So there are some sites, some website useful for applications. The European job market of economists, specifically for the European market, the Econ job market, where you can find a position across over the world, both Europe and outside Europe, and the American Economic Association website, which is specialized for the position in North America. So that means basically that the cost of an additional application is cheap. So you might want to apply for as many places as possible to be on the safe side. That say that there are any of us has some constraints because of geographical preferences, family constraints, personal stuff going on. So if there is really a place you are never going to join, my suggestion is not apply. So in order to save your time and the employer's time. Now, before the virtual job market step in, there was kind of, a rule of thumb according to which if you have X if you apply for X position, you're gonna get X over 3 interviews. So basically, this rule of 3. You can forget about it because, as Margaret was saying, now in a sense for employers, the interviews are quite cheap. That's not really the case for the fly out. Most of them, including for the UK, are now back to in person. So don't be too stressful about strategically thinking about it. It's not worthy. So now let's get to the application package, what we expect to get from you in your application. First of all, the CV. It usually includes the abstract from your research papers. My suggestion is to visit, especially North American university, they basically release the kind of optimal layout for an academic CV for people applying for the junior job market. So my suggestion is to check it out and adjust your CV accordingly. Then you are going to send us your research papers, for sure the job market paper. Okay, that's basically the minimum requirement in terms of a research package. Now, I want to slightly comment on the following. So what about having a co-authored job market paper? So are we as institution, are we going to discount somehow your job market paper if it's co-authored? So this is a tricky question, and the answer really depends on the circumstances. So if the paper is, if the job market paper is with other peers, so basically with the PhD students, most of the employers don't have any issue with that. Tricky part is if you co-author your job market paper with the senior people. If that's the case, my suggestion is, as much as possible, in your application package, to stress really where your contribution is, to let us understand in that joint paper what you did. So that's just an example. If, for example, your co-author are going to write your reference letter, it could be a very good strategy for them to stress in their reference letter where your contribution is. Okay? And needless to say, you are expected when you send your application paper, the application package, the job market paper needs to be polished. Of course, we can expect a working paper from a junior person, but still need to be polished. Okay. So then there is the cover letter. To be honest, this is a very short introduction of yourself. The reason why we may look at that is if the applicant want to signal some personal circumstances, some geographical preference. If you signal something like that in the reference letters, the signal we get is that you are particularly interested in the institution for personal reasons. That's fine, and something that can make a difference. All right. Then we got one of the most important part of your package, which is the reference letters. So at least two, but this largely depend on the institution, and it's going to be pivotal to your job market paper, to your job market, sorry. So the goal that you to ask to me is to ask the reference letter to academics who truly know your research, typically supervisors and co-authors. Just to make things clear, the example is a bit extreme, but that's to give you the intuition that a reference letter from a Nobel Prize winner attending randomly one of your presentations at some random conference is much less effective than a letter from some other academics who is fully able to describe your contribution, to stress your contribution in the literature. Okay. This also means that effective reference letter, and that's really something you want to have, take time. So academics are busy, supervisors are busy. So to be on the safe side, I would say allow 2-3 months for your referees to write the letter. Okay, so keep that in mind when applying. And of course, you don't want to put pressure on the people who's gonna write about your research. Okay. One more aspect for the application package is the research statement. This is going to consist of a summary of your current research plus future pipeline. So I think the most interesting part when we look at the research statement is that we really want to know if what you're going and what you're going to do is going to have some impact on the literature. So is it something that the scientific community is interested in? So basically, in your research statement, you need to convince us about that, about how interesting is your current research and is going to be your future research. And here my suggestion is not to be so you need to be specific enough, especially when you go to the future pipeline. Don't be speculative. If you have something in mind you are going to do, I mean, provide us with some details, okay? Not to be too general, not even in the description of the future pipeline. Depending on the institution, some of them can ask for a teaching statement. That is definitely the case for a teaching-oriented position. For more standard research and teaching track, this is going to depend on institution. Typically, what people are looking for in this teaching statement is your ability to motivate the students who have, for example, when you were a teaching assistant, and how you are going, how you got them involved, okay? In this part, also, institution can ask for teaching evaluation, so you need to make sure to get them. And one suggestion I may have about the teaching philosophy statement, it can be a good idea in your department to ask some senior colleague, especially those in the teaching track, to have a look at your teaching statement. Last thing I want to mention about the package is you need to make sure to have your personal website fully on. Sometimes, when we screen the CV, and then we want to get back to that profile, we just type the name of the person on the web, on internet, and we have a look at his profile. So it's important to have a personal website fully on when you apply. One thing I was forgetting before spending the last couple of minutes about timeline is so of course I suggest your package to be checked by your supervisor, but again, supervisors are busy, so you cannot expect them to have a look at your research statement, at your package several times. When you ask them to have a look, it means the draft you have is going to be the final one, okay? So there are a bit of details here on timing. So yeah, so my suggestion is just to get your application ready by September. That's my takeaway on that. So then briefly, job market presentation. It's going to, if hopefully you're gonna be invited for a fly out. The main part is gonna be present your own job market paper, typically between 60 and 90 minutes. I find that the most tricky part about job market presentation is that you're gonna have a general audience in front of you. So you're gonna need to trade off two factors. You need to be technical enough, specifically for the audience in your field, but you need to convince also people from other fields that you're gonna be a skilled researcher, a skilled colleague. And don't underestimate the fact that sometimes the academics outside your field can be, let's say, the swing voters in deciding to make you an offer. So you really need to find the optimal trade-off between those two forces. And the usual suggestion is, how can you get the optimal trade-off? Practice as many times as possible. So ask your department to organize mock job market presentation. Ask non-expert to attend. Get as much feedback as possible, and keep practicing the presentation of your job market paper. I'm gonna conclude by just saying I found it very good suggestion from the job market presentation at the time I was preparing, from a piece of by Monica Piazzesi from U of Chicago, tips on how to avoid disaster in presentations. It's publicly available on internet, so you may find it particularly useful for your preparation. And I will leave the floor to the other speakers.
Thank you very much, Alessio. So we now turn to our last but not least presenter this afternoon, who is Marika, who again was successful last year, I think, on the European job market. So over to you, Marika. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me share my screen. So yeah, so I was on the job market last year. I just joined Corvinus University in Budapest. And I will talk a little bit about the flyouts and about the flyouts and how to decide between different offers. So the flyouts start at the beginning of January. My first flyout was at January 8th, so it was really directly after some interviews, virtual interviews on the American job market. So I applied worldwide. So you can expect that the first flyout could be directly after these interviews if you are also applying on this market. You have to arrange the flyouts. So usually you get proposed perhaps just one date or several dates, but you are the one person in charge. You have to take care about your own agenda and to find a slot for each possible flyout. So just keep this in mind when scheduling it, that you somehow have time between the flyouts to travel, but also perhaps not too much time that you cannot travel, cannot arrange another flyout in this in between these two. Usually the institution inviting you books a hotel, and you are in charge of booking a flight or train, and then you get reimbursed later. However, I had everything. So I also had the case that I booked everything, or the institution inviting me was booking everything. So everything is possible, but be aware of this kind of financial resources you need to book the flights and the trains, or also even the hotels. You get reimbursed, but this can take some time. If you have any limit on your credit card, check this out. That's fine. You don't get in trouble at this time then, because it's a stressful time. You don't want to deal with this kind of things. Okay, especially if you're flying worldwide, you can try to combine flyouts to the same continent. So if you are interviewed, for example, from institutions in the US, so if you're in Europe now, if you're interviewed by an institution in the US, you can inform the other institution interviewing there once you get a flyout in the US. So just that they are aware of this, you can just write them a kindly email that you got a flyout in the US. If they want to somehow combine this and offer you another flyout, this would just reduce costs for both sides. So that's very helpful. Doesn't mean that you get this other flyout as well, so don't wait too long to book your flight, but yeah, it's a good way to try to combine this and to save money and time on both sides. Then usually a few days or even the day before the flyout, you get a schedule about the individual meetings. You can see who you will meet, so you can check out the series, the research agenda, the interests of the people you are meeting. That's just a little bit about the organization before the flyouts. Sorry, that's wrong. So during the flyouts, you have individual meetings, you have your job market presentation, and you have a lunch and dinner with people from the department. The individual meetings, you can prepare for them by checking the CVs, research, and interests of the faculty you are meeting to have an idea who they are and what they are interested in. And that's really a time where you can ask questions. It's about to get to know each other. So it's a matching process. You want to get to know who are your potential colleagues, and they want to get to know you. So use this time to get a feeling if you could imagine to work there, if you would like to live to work and to live there, and if they are colleagues where you would like to have a coffee with, or even perhaps a beer after this. So it's really about getting to know each other. And therefore, of course, especially if you're meeting junior faculty, use this also to ask questions about how is it to live there, especially if it's about moving to another country. How was the moving process? How did they settle there? Was it easy? Was it difficult? Those kind of things. And also this kind of more personal question. It's perfectly fine to ask them, especially for your junior faculty, how they feel there. Is there support for juniors? Is there a mentoring process? How is the research support? How is the interaction between senior and junior colleagues? This kind of things, it's perfectly fine to ask, and it's even expected because it shows that you are interested in these, the position, and interested in moving there. Be also prepared, Margaret also mentioned that you can be asked a question about how is your job market going. So basically it's again, the institution wants to know where you are, where this institution is on your ranking list. It's completely fine to be vague there and answer it, but be honest and don't lie. If it's like, don't claim it's on your first list if it's not, but being vague or not answering it all, that's completely fine, I think. And usually you also have a meeting with the head of department or the person responsible for recruitment, where you can ask the more questions about the conditions, about the tenure track conditions, and so on. Sometimes also you have a meeting with the person who's in charge of teaching that explains to you a little bit how the teaching responsibilities are there. Usually, but either you see this in the schedule, or you figure it out once you check the people on the schedule, or you will figure this out during the meetings. How to decide? Yeah, that's difficult. Well, of course, I think there are basically two parts. The first part is about the conditions of the position itself. So, of course, salary, research fund, teaching hours, all these kind of numbers seems too easy to be compared, but at the end they can be very different, and they can differ a lot across countries, across different universities, and they can also mean very different things. So especially take into account living costs between different countries, taxes, social security systems can be very different. So take this into account when you compare salaries. Also teaching hours can differ in the sense that you need to know if they include preparation, like if you have to prepare new courses, which takes much more preparation time as if they are already existing materials that you can use. So these kind of things influence a lot the meaning of these numbers. It also depends a lot across countries if there are possibilities for negotiations or not. Sometimes it's even expected, sometimes it's not possible because just there are fixed contracts from the university, there's just no possibility for negotiation. So this differs a lot across countries. Also, the academic systems and the tenure track conditions, the procedure differs a lot across the country. So try to figure out as much as possible information, get this information during the flyout or afterwards to be able to compare different offers. And then, of course, the second part is about your personal life, or also if you just would like to live in this place, if you had a good impression from the faculty, other people you would like to talk with, you can talk about your research, but also people you would like to have coffee with, lunch with, beer, or whatever. So you will live there, so you should be feeling comfortable with living there. And I think that's one important part as well. And then, of course, also your private situation is if you have a partner who wants to come with you, is there support from the university for your partner to finding a job or whatever? So there are many questions you can ask to compare different offers. For me, it was at some point it got a little bit easy because I was on the joint search with my partner. So once we got a joint offer, the decision was relatively easy. But of course, this is always an issue. You can consider how easy is it to commute to different places. All these things will influence your decision. So what especially helped me was to talk with people who knew the academic system of different countries, because at the end I had offers from different countries and countries where I haven't lived before. So it really helped me. In my case, I was lucky that for example, placement officer at my university from his own experience, knew different academic systems, and he could give me some feedback about the offer, but also about the academic system in the different countries, and that helped me a lot to be able to understand how the tenure track system works, how the contract, or what exactly the numbers of the contract or the offer mean, and to compare them better. So if there's anybody who you can talk to who may have experience about the country where you got an offer from, or even the place, take this advantage to get some feedback there. That's was my personal experience. During the period where you get an offer, it's completely fine to ask for an extension, but be fair. So if you don't want to go there, you don't ask for an extension just to negotiate with another place. It's also completely fine if you get an offer, but your preferred place haven't got to you. Yes, so just send an email to your preferred place asking about the timing. If there's any, like, very kindly email if it's like if it would make sense for you to wait for their offer, basically. That's completely fine, but don't do this just to be able to negotiate. So be really fair. If you have accepted an offer, inform the other places that you are out of the market, because it's a very, very fast process. And this is just being fair to other candidates who are waiting for the offer from the places where you applied as well, and also for the institutions that invited you. And the last point is just super stressful. So just a few things that helped me. I called it the little things that could make you feel better. So for me, what helped me just to, for example, to have a good start to the day, I usually at home have always the same tea in the morning. So I took some of the tea with me. I had this tea in the morning in the hotel, and it just helped me to have a good start to the day. It's super stressful. So if there are any small things, playlists with your favorite music, if you're usually running in the evening, why not doing this the day before you fly out as well? Like, just think about this. If there's any small things that are easy to take with you or do during the fly out, why not? If it helps you to reduce stress, to be more relaxed, to sleep better, just do it. And at the end, have fun. It's also a nice opportunity to meet many people. I know it's super strange to think about this as a nice time, but it's a great opportunity to meet people, to talk with people, many people that are interested in what you are doing. That's just a great opportunity to talk about your research. So also try to have a little bit of fun.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you to all our 4 speakers this afternoon. Everyone's had amazing insights from all the 4 speakers. So just to reiterate a couple of themes that have been emerging. First of all, in the preliminary, possibly online stages, check your internet connection and check how you appear online. So those suggestions came from Ram and from Margaret, and I know from being one of those people interviewing, you can either create an immediate great impression or a bad impression. So great advice there. I think it was Margaret and Marika who both said, do your research on the departments, and that is so important. As somebody on those interview panels, I listen particularly carefully to whether the job market applicants have done their research on the departments. That's one of the biggest signals as to whether somebody is potentially interested in a position there. And then Alessio said about practicing your presentation. So if there are opportunities in your department to do practice presentations, practice job market interviews, take those opportunities. And also, I would say, just get anyone who's willing to listen to, and do those practices. So sometimes doing a practice job market presentation or an interview to maybe a partner or a best friend who maybe isn't an economist can be really helpful, because I always find it's more stressful doing that presentation to somebody I know really well compared to somebody I don't know. So you've had lots of suggestions. I can't see any more questions in the chat. So if anyone's got any questions,
there's one question. I think
messages.
Yes, okay. I got a direct message about at what point I negotiate about the joint offer with my partner. It's a super difficult decision. In our case, there were two positions at one university, actually even, well, yeah, two positions at one university and also two positions at another university in the same city. And we applied to all four of them. And well, we knew some people we knew one person at one of the places, and we realized that they're communicating a lot. And we mentioned it already in the cover letter. But this was because there were these two positions, and we thought that we can signal that we are really willing to go to Budapest because we didn't have any connection to Budapest before. So this was somehow, we used our joint application as a signal that we would be very happy to come if they make us both an offer. And it worked out, but in general, I think it's a super difficult decision. And when I was on the job market, I heard any advice from not saying it at all until like already saying it during the application. It depends, I think, a lot on we did a mixed thing. So for some applications, we mentioned it, for some not, depending on the exact posting. It depends a lot on your own situation as well, like how flexible you are there, how willing you are to commute. Yeah. I don't know if there's the best way. I don't think so.
Thank you. So, have any of our other speakers got direct messages in the chat to them? Margaret hasn't. Alessio Ram? No. So, so then it's up to individual participants. If you've got questions, this is your chance. We've got a few more minutes, so please just raise your hand and we will take questions. Bruno, over to you, Bruno.
Lovely. Thanks a lot for the presentation. I have a question actually about something I heard from some colleagues, and I wanted to hear from your own experience. I don't know exactly how it's called, but this thing about, they call, I think it's reallocation packages. So they help you to move, especially if you are going to other countries. I've heard that from some colleagues who got positions in, industry. I don't know if in academy that's common, so I wanted to hear about it. Thank you.
So this is a question, thank you, Bruno, more for Alessio and Ram. Some universities definitely do have relocation packages. Some will help with visa application costs as well, but it seems very university specific. Alessio, Ram?
Yeah, I agree. So as far as I know, most of the university, at least in the UK, or I would say my experience is UK and the US, offer such a package. Sometimes it's also very generous. But again, Caroline was right in stressing it really depends on the institution. My 2 cents about that would be most of the institutions in Europe would offer a package like that. So yes.
Yeah, I'll just add my 2 pennies. It also depends on so most universities, they actually have to report to the HMRC about this package. So it depends on what position it is, and I couldn't expand on the funding model. So it really depends on the position and the university and how they have done the paperwork. So all in all, yes, you will get an offer. You can negotiate, but sometimes the hands are pretty tied because of this paperwork. So it's a hit or a miss. But as Alessio said, most of the time you will succeed. But if you don't succeed, don't say that it is a person-specific thing. So I can tell you how much paperwork I have to do if I have to pay a relocation to someone. So some people decide, if I'm getting somebody from the UK, I'm going with it, So yeah, so.
Thank you. So we've got a couple more questions in the chat. So first of all, we've got a question from Elisa, who says, if an institution has 2 available positions, for example, for a postdoc and an assistant professor, is it odd to apply for both? Is it a good or a bad signal? in my experience, I would say that it's a good signal because it shows that you are particularly interested in that institution. However, any of our speakers, feel free to jump in and talk about your experiences of this.
I just would say the combination between a postdoc and a lecturer, I think it depends on whether or not you've already had some postgraduate experience, right? So if the lecturer is kind of, they want to have someone who's already started to publish, you don't want to kind of downgrade yourself. But yeah, in general, I completely agree. It's just basically signaling the strength of you just want to make sure that you're qualified for the position you're applying for.
Yeah, my recommendation would be go for both.
Okay, thank you. So the next question from Ji. Would you recommend to reveal that you want to find jobs in a specific country in consideration of your spouse or partner? So I would say to be open about that if your interview is in that country where you're particularly interested, because I think it can reassure the interview panel that you're serious about the job. Everybody's nodding at me. Marika, you've been open. This was a consideration for you. Do you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, I completely agree. So I think you can, like, that's what we also did. Like, well, we were both in different countries before and applied at the same time. But when there was somehow, when we could use this both application as a signal that we would like to go to this place, we revealed it in the cover letter. And I think that's something you could also use a lot if the country you're applying to is the country where we spouse is, and just mention it in the cover letter because it gives or explains your motivation to go there.
Thank you. And I'm mindful of time. So we've got one last question in the chat. So thank you very much, Jeremy. And I'm going to ask this question to Margaret and Marika. And Jeremy's asking, how do you make a decision about different positions when some are associated with permanent contracts and other places may offer you a position and it's a fixed term contract? And not only how do you weigh up options in terms of permanent contracts versus fixed term contracts, but also to what extent did you think about the possible promotion applications at the places where you had offers?
Do you want to start, Marika, or should I?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I think if you know that you have a tenure track position versus a non-tenure track position, I would always apply for a tenure track position. Those are the more competitive positions to get. And, you know, with a fixed term contract, then with probability 1, you're going to have to leave. Whereas you have a probability of being promoted and staying at the university after, you know, in some cases, a longer tenure track process and investing, maybe starting a family, these kind of things. So it becomes quite costly to have to relocate. So I think, you know, if that's a place where you could see yourself kind of longer term, then you should absolutely go for a tenure track position. That's just kind of my initial take on that. Unless there's a very low teaching load, like if it looks more like a postdoc where you think you can really work on your pipeline and then be more competitive when you go back on the market after a couple of years, then that's something that you could consider depending on your positioning post PhD. I think that's kind of definitely a valid reason to consider a fixed term contract if it offers an opportunity to work on your pipeline significantly, but that's often not the case. That's my take on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can just agree. So, and perhaps it also depends, like in my case, I did a postdoc before. So when I was on the market, I was really interested in tenure track positions.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious
If
of
I
time.
can ask,
oh, sorry.
If I
yes,
can
go.
add from the point of view of the institution, just super quick.
Okay.
That when we offer a tenured position, we usually, I mean, all the institutions should also provide a clear overall picture about the criteria you will need to satisfy get tenured or to get promoted. So that's perfectly fine to ask from the candidate point of view, and the institution provide such an information that they should do it in the most transparent way possible, just to allow the candidate to make the most possible informed decision. And that was it.
Thank you.
Just one second,
Rao?
Caroline. Just to Alessio's comment, yeah, Alessio, I agree with you, but sometimes it is actually difficult to provide the clearest picture. So definitely somebody can answer something, but some institutions may not be in a position to provide a clear picture. And from my experience, I know of several institutions who probably will not be able to answer that question 3 years ahead of time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Right, we've got 2 final questions in the chat, and I'm going to answer them because I hope my answers aren't going to be too controversial. So Marley has asked about whether people should ask questions about the teaching load during the flyouts, and apparently some people have advised Marley not to ask, some people have advised to ask. I would say it's fine to ask, because each department will have an idea in advance of how much teaching they expect of new assistant professors. So just because you ask about teaching doesn't mean you're going to get more of it. And I would actually go back to a point that Margaret made in her presentation, where she said, be honest about what you'd be happy to teach. I think that's really important, because people do take notes of what people say they are willing and able to teach. So don't promise things and then have a nasty shock that you're asked to actually teach those things. And then the last question is from Sakanya, who says, for international flyouts, are institutions willing to bear visa costs, and are they willing to interview until the candidate receives their visa? So Kanya, this is a really good question. Again, it's probably institution specific, but it's absolutely fine to ask that question to whoever contacts you to invite you for the flyout. So don't worry about asking. You're not going to give a bad signal by asking the question. Okay, we've run a couple of minutes over. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to all 4 of our speakers this afternoon, to Ram, to Margaret, to Alessio, and to Marika. I'd also like to say a big thank you to the Royal Economic Society for organising this event, and to Georgina, and a big thank you to all the participants. It's great to have you here today, and it's great to get your questions. Good luck on the job market. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Don't forget the poll. Okay. Bye-bye.